I'm here with Noelle London. She leads up entrepreneurship and innovation at Invest Atlanta. And we're here at Coffee Shop Talk. I'm here with Noelle London, and she leads innovation and entrepreneurship at Invest Atlanta. And Invest Atlanta is a really cool asset for the community that helps with special projects, all kinds of really cool things that will continue to boost and further the entrepreneurial or the entire Atlanta ecosystem. So I have a very brief cursory knowledge of it right now, and we're about to find out a lot more. So stick here if you want to know more about Invest Atlanta and more about Noelle, because she's probably one of the most interesting people in Atlanta right now. So cool, awesome. Coffee Shop Talk.
Thank you. That's very kind.
Yeah, I think so. Like, I saw you on the South by Southwest thing, so like that's important, you know.
Yeah,
and,
it's
like,
fun.
I didn't get to go to South by Southwest.
There's a lot of exciting stuff. Yeah, we're excited to be a part of it.
So I guess the first thing is, tell me about what your role is in Invest Atlanta and what Invest Atlanta is.
Yeah, so I'll start with Invest Atlanta. So we're the Economic Development Authority for the City of Atlanta. What's really pretty interesting about Invest Atlanta is that we have a community development and economic development housed under one roof. So when you think about our community development teams, they're doing things like affordable housing, redevelopment efforts, working on neighborhood revitalization, do a lot of pretty interesting things around real estate for the city. And then we also have economic development at Invest Atlanta. That's the team that I sit on. So we're doing anything from attracting large companies to the city, to helping those companies that are here grow and expand and helping them feel supported by the city. We have a small business loan program, so working with small businesses, and then we have our innovation entrepreneurship efforts, which I have recently come in to lead up. So, across the board, we're touching a lot of different things, but I think that that's what's really exciting about Atlanta right now is there's just so much opportunity, and I think that we're trying to approach this very holistically and not only think about prosperity, but also equity around the city. So in terms of innovation entrepreneurship, this is a relatively new program for Invest Atlanta. Coming into Invest Atlanta, and we'll get into that. I'm coming from the startup world, and so thinking about where are the challenges that entrepreneurs face when they're building their companies. The biggest challenges and the hardest ones to solve are around funding, access to customers, and talent. And so we are building out a toolkit and programs that help to address each of those gaps within the ecosystem. And so building that toolkit is one of the things that we're doing. And then also just generally, how do we build the ecosystem? How do we support entrepreneurs as they're growing and expanding, as entrepreneurs that are in around the globe, around the country, are thinking about their presence, a second location, expansion? We want them to be thinking about Atlanta.
So now, this is a question you don't have to answer, because
Okay.
I've had people tell me they cannot answer this question. But so you mentioned that you help get businesses into this place, right? Into Atlanta. And I imagine that part of that, and you don't have to expound on it or anything, but do y'all play a role in getting things like Amazon to come here and things like that?
Absolutely, we're definitely a part of that.
Okay, cool,
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah,
I've had some places that say, no, we cannot talk about that.
Yeah,
It's always really interesting.
I mean, we're the official economic development authority for the city, so we play a role in that, and we're a part of that. But we're not just focused on those large companies. I mean, we also need to be focused on the pipeline of new companies.
Yeah.
And if something were to happen and disrupt Amazon, we want to make sure that we have kind of a diverse economy, so that we have other companies that can help to create those jobs that maybe would go away as companies are growing and expanding and there's disruption in the market. So we also are working on bringing startup companies to Atlanta. One of the programs that we host is the International Startup Exchange, which we host with the Mayor's Office of International Affairs. And so that started a couple of years ago, started with Toulouse, France. Last year we expanded to the UK. We're expanding to the third market this year. And so those are those companies that are high potential, growing, have a lot of traction in their home countries, and are starting to think about the U.S. And so we bring them to Atlanta during Venture Atlanta Week, set them up with B2B meetings, investors, so that when they are ready to make that decision, that they already feel supported by the city of Atlanta and know, hey, I'm coming to Atlanta and I know what this ecosystem has to offer. So we're not only focused on those big companies, we're focused on the little ones too.
That's really cool. So I imagine that, bringing in companies, like I've seen a lot of news. I watch a lot of the, Atlanta Business Journal. Yukarvesh Kakaria. He's like one of the guys that does a lot of the, this company's coming to Atlanta, news in the morning type thing. So I see a lot of that. And so I've seen a lot of these, not just startups, but like smaller businesses coming from San Francisco or from the other kind of meccas and into Atlanta. And then also, like Mercedes headquarters and things like that coming, which is absolutely beautiful.
And their innovation office right up the road. It's very cool.
Exactly. So, I mean, that just tells you at least what they look at Atlanta as far as talent-wise and opportunity-wise. So I think that's really interesting. So with all of that, I think what's interesting is I saw a program that you guys launched, I think, this last week, or maybe you've done it for years or something like that, but it's the internship program.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really cool. Like my wife works at a startup here in town. She's like, we're definitely applying. Awesome. Like, this is cool. So can you tell me about that?
Yeah, so really, again, this is one of those programs that's a part of our toolkit now. And so, notice that within any ecosystem, tech talent is going to be a challenge for a startup. Startups don't have money to sometimes pay interns. They're iterating very quickly. They may need somebody temporarily, but not a full-time hire. And on the student side, especially students that are coming from underrepresented backgrounds within tech, if there is an unpaid opportunity, they may need that paid opportunity and go towards more of a traditional career path. So we want to expose more students in Atlanta to entrepreneurship earlier, so that they know it's not that classic story with a founder of how did you figure out that you're an entrepreneur and when did you know that you wanted to start a company, and then it's like I was 30 years old and finally figured out that this is a part of me and this is part of my DNA. We want to expose those students earlier to entrepreneurship so that we can see if they're exposed, does it mean that they then go into the entrepreneurial field. So what we're doing is we're subsidizing students to go and work with startups this summer. We're working with, so Invest Atlanta is working with WorkSource Atlanta, the workforce development agency for the city, as well as Startup Atlanta.
Oh, cool.
And we will be covering 2/3 of the cost of that internship, and then the startup will be covering 1/3 of the cost.
Cool.
So we just want to facilitate the process, want to make sure that those students are getting in front of startups, recognizing that it's an opportunity. We'll be paying for it. We'll be doing some of the professional development, but ultimately it's a really great opportunity for the startups to link up with the students and kind of develop that internship program together.
So to be clear, if someone charges $15 an hour for a internship, you guys will pay for $10 an hour of it.
Yeah. So the way it's going to work,
the
way it's going to work is that the startup company will pay for the first 4 weeks.
Oh, cool.
So they will pay that student directly.
Yeah.
We will then pay for the last 8 weeks of that internship.
Cool.
So 2/3
it
of
works, whatever it is, that works exactly.
We're trying to keep it clean and simple.
That's awesome.
Startups and students will be applying for the opportunity. The application is open. Got a lot of interest just from yesterday. So we're really excited about it.
So it launched yesterday? Have you all done it before?
It launched no, this is the first time.
Oh, okay, cool.
18 students in 2018. And then we're learning from this pilot, and we'll see, next year how do we iterate and expand on the program.
Yeah.
So this is a first for us, but we're really excited about it.
I've seen something about this, like I think there's another thing called like Venture for America or something that does something similar to this, right? So
somewhat similar. They're not going to be in Atlanta this year, and I think that the program's a little bit different and focused on a different kind of student. But I think that's definitely a very cool program as well. I've had a couple of former colleagues that have gone through that program and said wonderful things about it.
I think a part of that is to bring people to areas that they wouldn't typically go to, right? So I moved here from Birmingham, and it's kind of big in Birmingham, and there isn't a program, or there's not a real Invest Atlanta. There is other things in Birmingham, but there's nothing that's really, I don't think it's codified as what you guys are, or your team is. And so I think it's really great to see once those programs aren't necessarily accessible here, you make the program so that those opportunities are still accessible.
And it's important that, you know, Atlanta-based students know what's happening in the ecosystem here. I mean, I remember when I was in college, it was, you know, you were kind of on campus and a lot of your programs were on campus, but if students are at all interested in entrepreneurship, we want them to know you don't have to pick up and go to the West Coast to be a part of this. Like, we have some really great companies that are high potential in Atlanta. We want to make sure that they know about the opportunities that are here, and so Atlanta-based companies with Atlanta-based startups to try and begin to foster that connection.
So how does Invest Atlanta play with the other groups like Technology Association of Georgia, you know, Atlanta Tech Village, Switchyards, all these other places? How do y'all work together?
Yeah, so there are so many players in the ecosystem, and everything we do, we have to partner with. You know, we partner with other organizations, and so work closely with ATV, work closely with TAG, the Chamber, Mayor's Office of International Affairs. You know, across the board, we're really trying to work with all of those different groups. I think we want to keep these kinds of conversations over coffee going, of understanding what's happening within the ecosystem, where are there gaps, where can we fill them, and where can we partner up and collaborate to try and address some of these challenges, because, you know, we're focused on those big challenges, and no one player is going to build the ecosystem, and so it's kind of all of us lifting Atlanta up and making it even stronger.
So if you see one thing that Atlanta needs, or two things, I don't care, I'm not going to limit the number, but whatever you think, what does Atlanta need to continue progress? Because, like, I think we're on a really great trajectory right now, that everyone says, what's the one thing to make it to the next thing? And I don't think it's like this like tiered structure of, you know, I think it's more about like just continuing the progress but trying to accelerate the progress. So if there was something that would accelerate the progress, what do you think that would be?
Yeah, great question. I don't think that we have the ability to just focus on one thing. If I could just focus on one thing, and I think where we could really move things forward in Atlanta, I mean, we're not the funding capital. You know, the funding, if we're going to be honest, the funding is going to California, Boston, New York. I mean, yeah, California, Boston, New York. What we do have in Atlanta is a real opportunity to be the testing and validation capital. We have the third largest concentration of Fortune 500 companies. We have 20 plus corporate innovation centers. One is opening every single week. That means we have structured programs where entrepreneurs can actually know and find their customer. And that, you know, entrepreneurs spend a lot of time trying to get to that right person within an organization.
Yeah.
The fact that we have that structured program set up, I mean, if we could be the testing and validation capital, if we could create more test beds in and around the city, so that if there is an IoT company in Germany, in Singapore, anywhere around the world, they know, I need to test and validate my product. I want to start looking at the US, and that they know that we have that test bed here and that soft landing, so that they can come here and then grow their company here. So I think if a dream could come true, it would be, how do we create as many test beds as possible, make it as easy as possible for startups to come here and get access to customers.
Yeah, I think that's definitely one of the primary concerns always in a startup, or if it's not, it's an unknown concern to startups, is that you need to be in an area that has a concentration of businesses that will test or use you as a research and development arm of their business as the startup ecosystem. And I always kind of point to this. I think on the investing side, Atlanta, I don't think it's that, like, it's not like it's that far back. It's just there's an obvious gravitational pull to certain areas because of the concentration of those businesses, and they've historically grown from that point. And so what we're trying to do is write some history for ourselves.
Right,
you know?
right.
And you see, like with SalesLoft raising $50 million, and I think one of the groups was from here, right? That was like Engage, in that?
Engage is here.
Yeah, so I think they were involved in it. Maybe I'm wrong, don't quote me there. So like they raised $50 million here, and we see that very frequently. But I think what's really interesting that I see is that in some of these rural markets, some of the markets that I've come from, if you are a business that has some legs or is going to raise some money, they ask you to then move out to this other area. But because of the concentration of businesses here, the support, the relatively low cost of living to those primary hubs of innovation, it ends up being like you don't have to move. You know what I mean? Like you've got access to the biggest airport in the history of the world, right? You've got access to every giant company that could exist, and they all flow through here at some point in time, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you have access to talent, right? And so like, it's really neat that I think that you don't have to necessarily move around to build a business, at least from Atlanta.
Yeah, and capital is mobile, and it's one of those things where, I mean, coming from an incubator in the incubator world, where a lot of times that was the first touch point when a startup would want to come in and engage with us. And the first question was always, well, can you introduce me to investors? Can you introduce me to angel investors? And it was like, whoa, you need the traction before you ever can talk about the funding. And so I think, on both sides, both for early stage companies in Atlanta, of getting that initial traction in those pilots, we have the recipe for success for that. And then as those companies are growing and scaling and needing access to more customers, we have that as well. And so, I think that if we can really hone in on that, that's going to make us a lot more attractive, and that's going to make investors want to see those companies that have traction in Atlanta. But those customers are not as mobile as maybe the capital is.
So, I think I've got two more questions. So one, I see a lot of other ecosystems in Atlanta, right? So it's a pretty culturally diverse city. And there's been a lot of conversation about inclusion and diversity. The fact that we were one of the leaders in the civil rights movement has been, I think, transferred or at least transposed onto our responsibility to be an inclusive and diverse environment.
Yeah.
And so I see things like the hip hop community in Atlanta, right? Like, it's huge. Like, it is so huge, it's ridiculous, right?
And the music tech company.
Music tech, right?
Yeah.
And then you've got like A3C, the hip hop conference that's here in town, and then you've got all these different music artists and stuff like that, and then you've got a really good, robust art scene, and you've got a really good technology scene. How do you guys envision meshing those things together and continuing to? I think you guys might be the glue that helps hold these things together, because it's like your responsibility to bolster these types of communities. But how do you guys envision doing that?
That's a great question. And I think that you're spot on. I mean, I wear a lot of different hats, and it's anything from having conversations around the IoT ecosystem to smart cities ecosystem to women in tech ecosystem to, I mean, there are lots of kind of different ecosystems that are here. I think that we are trying to really understand how that fits together. I mean, past life was kind of doing ecosystem mapping, and I think understanding, as we start talking about some of these communities like the creative industries community, like music tech, film tech, understanding, does that ecosystem look the same as what we've traditionally thought of how we build an ecosystem? And so at Invest Atlanta, we have a creative industries lead. My colleague Shiaki Jones works right next door to me, and she's focused on creative industries and how that overlays with tech. And so that's something that's emerging in Atlanta. It's something that we're really excited about. It's something that has a huge economic impact, and we want to understand it better. And so I think we are very much having the same conversations of how do we bring all of these together. Do they need to be separate ecosystems? Is that, or are they ultimately tapping into the same resources, the same funders, the same customers? And so should they be layered within one ecosystem and have the resources that they need to make them successful? But yeah, I don't think we have the answer, but I do think that it's something that we are involved in and talking about, and would love to talk with others that are having similar conversations.
Yeah, I think these aren't answerable things. I think that they're more organic conversations that they will eventually codify into their own entity or something like that over time, that says like, this is how we communicate. I guess the last question that's on my mind is, what do you do outside of Invest Atlanta, the startup ecosystem, entrepreneurship, all of that? Like, what is your life outside of Atlanta, Invest Atlanta?
Okay. So moved to Atlanta about 8 months ago.
Oh, okay. So you're new to
I'm a newbie.
Yeah.
I'm a newbie still.
I moved back 3 months ago, or 4 months ago.
Okay.
I lived here for 26 years and then moved back.
Okay.
So
great. So I think still getting to know the city. I have a dog named Hefe. He is a Choco Labrador and everything. And so spend a lot of time on the Beltline with him, exploring Atlanta. We spend a lot of time going up to Buford Highway and finding the best Asian spots.
I keep hearing about Buford Highway and food. I haven't done this yet.
Got some recommendations.
Yeah.
And so, spending a lot of time exploring right now. It's also, I moved from the DC area about 8 months ago, so it's nice to be closer to my family. My brother's down in Charleston opening a restaurant right now.
Cool.
It's called Chubby Fish.
Oh, cool.
So spend a lot of time kind of figuring out how we help him with getting that off the ground. He's been a chef for over a decade and opening his own spot for the first time. So very much an entrepreneur as well.
Well, awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming and hanging out with me. I know it's been, for everybody that doesn't know, I stood her up the other day on accident.
I found a cool new coffee shop in East Atlanta Village.
Exactly. I need to go out there and check that out. But so we've been trying to make this happen, and I really appreciate you taking the time and hanging out with me.
Yeah, so, thanks. Thanks for inviting us.
Well, Coffee Shops is out. It's in the books, and thanks for watching.